I don't know where he is. And Randall, I haven't heard from either, but I think we will probably get going. So hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello.
It's a miracle. Commissioner, do you have any opening words that you'd like to?
Well, yeah, I would just say that I know, probably people had a rough night. Some of us are a little sleep deprived because you're probably checking on things. In my case, it's a very, dated sump pump. It's trying to keep my 230-year-old basement from flooding completely. So, it was up a little bit late, but, yeah, I hope you all fared okay. I know the wind was blowing pretty hard last night, and, it is kind of a miracle that we have power, and, but I'm excited for us to get working here and finalize this, plan. So thank you, everybody, for being here or being online and taking the time. So with that.
Okay, sorry, let me just get situated for one moment with paperwork since it's been a funny morning. All right, well, what I'd love to do for starters is, review the agenda with all of you and sorry, if you could just be patient for one more moment so that I'm sure that I have the best draft of everything in front of me. So what we're scheduled to do today is wrap this up in a tidy bow and get to the point where we can be submitting a report to the legislature by the end of the calendar year. It's actually going to happen by the end of next week because I'll be on vacation after that, but technically it's due January 6th. And I do want to review the working agreements. I know these are items that you've seen at every meeting, but I find particularly at the last meeting, it's helpful to keep this in mind. So just quickly, thank you all for getting here. And for those of you online, thanks for tuning in and I'm going to rely on Tom to let me know when you want to make some remarks and just raise your hand and Tom will see that. We'll make sure we have the opportunity for public comment as
And
well.
we're just adding Julianne Smith now. As a
Okay, great,
public member.
thank you. We're hoping that you've really read the materials in detail, since this is sort of the last opportunity to weigh in, and we will have seen some changes that were made, and as we go through the recommendations, I'll just highlight the key points that were changed since the last time you saw them. We're hoping that you'll strive for equal airtime and make sure that everybody's voice gets in the room and that your concerns are expressed and that we try to wrestle them to the ground. And where you are hearing something that you don't agree with, if you could just try to have some openness to understanding a different perspective before landing on your own conclusion. So we are trying to obviously problem solve today and get to the point of agreeing on a final product. And where there is difficulty or tension, I know that you all are very kind to one another, and I really appreciate that sentiment. And no harm in laughing, so feel free to keep it light where we can. You received about 10 pages of public comment, less than that, and I wanted to make sure that we gave you ample time to just reflect on any parts of that you felt were potentially important to pull forward. I will note that because there was a finance or funding related subgroup that did meet subsequent to the last time we met in plenary, that one item from one of the public comments was actually pulled forward into the redraft, and that had to do with a new funding idea, so you will have seen that. Any other comment that was, or idea that was in the public comments, I left it for this conversation for you to, express anything that you'd like to have added. So I'll just open it up at that point, but just, sorry, really quickly before that, we then will go into walking through each of the now 14, I think it is, recommendations, one by one. I'll flag the things that were changed and then just open it up to see where you're feeling about where we've landed so far. Always providing an opportunity for public input. If you'd like that earlier, we can do that and shift it and then continue the conversation. We'll have a break in there at some point, and that's it. Any questions about the agenda, things that you thought were going to be on there that you didn't see? I'm happy to circle back. All right, well, let me just open it up then for thoughts that you have about the public comments. Anything that you thought should be added in as a result or considered.
Yeah, is this the time to bring up my issue or shall we wait?
Well, if we're on the public comments, let's just wait for 1 second. Public comments that were in the packet. Any thoughts that you had about that? And Julie Marie, to your point, I think the concerns that you have seem like they're around recommendation 1 and 2, 2 and 3. So let's cover those then.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, Steve.
Public comment number 3 from Representative Kluger. He stated about his final request around statutory language amendments pertaining to grant programs, AMLF, DIF, and AFFIF, wanting language to be specific as possible. I know way back a number of meetings ago, we talked about, I think there was a public comment making light of the language on some of the applications was dated such that people applying now, certain language makes it not applicable, so they can qualify now. I think just updating the language, I know we talked about, but are there specific things that people want to see, that either words or phrases or things that aren't in practice or are making it hard for farmers to qualify? Are there things that we should specifically change? And then also along that line, the response that we had from DFA asking for possible improvements to certain state guidelines on making some of those programs available to entities that are in state but have home base out of state. I think that was addressed in an update you had had.
Right.
And it did speak about
Yeah, that's, in recommendation
tax and
5B right at the moment. It's referenced at the end of 5B. I don't know if it feels sufficient.
the one question I had was, it does speak about public investment in the form of tax incentives, low interest capital, or other financial tools for expansion infrastructure improvements by these processors. Should the word grant be in there? Or do we feel like that would narrow the playing field for dairy farmers specifically?
Do you have a perspective about that yourself?
I don't, I guess I I see both sides of it. I thought maybe a group decision on that might be the best, so.
Well, so let's cover those 2 points. Let's cover the second one first. Perspectives on expanding that language.
I think there's some benefit in putting grant language in there because we are talking about. Well, we are talking about right above the 2 largest plants. This whole section talks about all of the processing, and because we have processing in a variety of scale. We wanna make sure that as many can tap into options out there. We do have some grants in particular that target dairy processing. Whether or not any of those programs are geared to fit the larger ones. At this point, probably not, but I don't think it's a reason to exclude grants out there because there may be something down the road
Sure.
that could.
So one option, if you all wanted to do this, is in that same sentence under 5B that Steve just read out, where it talks about tax incentives, low interest capital, or other financial tools. I could just put including grants right after that, if you'd like that added.
We don't feel other financial tools covers other things. We have to be explicit and say grants.
I think the fact that it was, it already has been raised as a question. I don't think it harms us to put that in.
Do you have concerns about the specificity of that?
No, I just don't want it to seem like we're suggesting we set up a whole nother grant program in state for processors exclusively necessarily, because there is a lot of regional grant. There are regional grant opportunities through DBIC that are specific to processors, I think of all size. I'm not against it, I just wondered if, it's my opinion that other financial tools include potential grant opportunities or, that's fun. If we need to be explicit, that's fine too.
Great.
Just wondering if we put the grants before the other financial tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So low
Put that
interest
in the
capital,
list.
comma, grants
Yeah.
or other financial tools. How do people feel about that? Annie's not thinking. Or.
Not strongly opposed, I do wanna be sure that the investments are, it says that if the investments are utilized in state, if there, we should highlight that.
Okay, and I'm inclined to add that in. So to Steve's first point, really about existing funding programs, FFF, DIP, AMLF, PIF, we are not highly specific, I don't think. The places in which those programs are referenced are in recommendation 4 under subsection 1 and 2. We also make sort of passing reference under the bond. Is it? Yeah, we do flag improvement fund under recommendation 14. So if you want to take a look at those 2 for a second and see if you feel like you want to be more specific in this.
And I just look back at my notes from one of the times that we talked about it, and I captured that we talked about increasing the cap. Or the amount that can be requested, and I do see that here, that is in recommendation 4. But the other piece that was raised, and I think it was Miriam, I think you noted that there's some kind of, with AMLF, there's like a 2-year threshold in statute that maybe should be looked at.
So AMLF does not have a 2-year threshold, but Farms for the Future does.
Okay.
And Farms for the Future would change an AMLF loan from 5% to 2%. So there's some interest for, especially folks who are taking over a farm or they're in farm transfer, they're starting a farm, but they've been managing elsewhere. They have the experience, they just happen to be starting a new business. That loan access is pretty critical at that point. And being able to have the lower interest rate would be helpful, is the feedback I've heard.
So what piece of that do you feel like is not covered? It does say FFF, hold on. By providing additional funding to expand and engage more farms in FFF. But then,
It's, the new farms is not particularly, existing in new farms is not particularly explicit or specific. It's not defined, you know, in that language, so I'm not sure that it's technically a 3-year-old farm would also be considered a beginning farm. But we're talking about starting a farm in those first few months. So I'm not sure that it's capturing those first 2 years.
so the parenthetical phrase in there right now is intended to accurately describe the way the program
Runs now.
runs now. I want to make sure that's correct currently, and if it isn't, we can modify that, but then beyond that, it sounds like it's insufficient to address needs that brand new farmers have.
Yeah, I think that I would probably strike "and new farms" in that parenthetical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then is
Uh,
the suggestion that more language be added to say that you have an interest in expanding that program in order to be available to starting farms that are starting, or not? Am I misunderstanding? Steve, and
Well,
then-
I was just gonna to add another thread to this conversation. I do recall that we had a good conversation at one point. There was a lot of agreement that some of the restrictions like dairy improvement fund, for example, you know, would we have any interest in opening that up to small scale processors who are not necessarily milking animals? I think there was some interest in that, whether or not, yeah, I can see it didn't make them be here, so I don't. But there are opportunities to support. That we might want to consider.
Okay, well, hold that thought for one moment. Let me just go back, and I haven't forgotten you, Julie Marie, but to get to Steve's original point, is there language that you all are wanting added that somehow expands the opportunity for funding for brand new farmers? Is this covered adequately in the way these programs are designed currently?
Do the programs, do Farms of the Future or AMLF fund, is there a requirement that you have a certain year, a number of years of experience?
An individual has to have owned that particular farm and operated that particular farm in Maine for 2 years.
For 2 years,
So if you've moved from a different farm, you know, it doesn't count.
okay,
If you are moving your farm business as a whole unit to Maine, that doesn't count.
okay.
So there's a lot of different ways that we might have an exception where we would probably want to fund a new farm, but we cannot under the current schema.
I think we do need that into that because I mean, in Maine, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of brand spanking new opportunities, but there is gonna be a lot, we've talked about a lot about transition. So if
Mhm.
there is a transition or, you know, apprenticeship or anything.
Could I move some power?
Yes.
Yeah, all of the
All-
interior outlets here.
Do you need that going right now? Or do you want us to come back when the meeting's over?
Yeah, I think when it's over.
Okay, when would that be?
1.
1 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're all set with the cord?
Running it from the outside corridor.
Okay, all right, we'll come back at the 1 then.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
got it. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that's the-
Could I ask a clarifying question that dovetails there? Because we're talking about this farm transition question, for example, if you've been operating a farm that you didn't own, but you know, the transfer happens and suddenly you own it. Are you starting a 2-year waiting period to?
Yeah. You are.
Because in that situation, it's like,
You
you know, if the farm has been in existence for 50 years, it seems a little silly. Or if you've been operating it but not had the ownership
Especially if that's often just kind of a paperwork
Right.
thing,
Yeah.
yes, that is the case. That would
Okay.
exclude somebody for 2 years.
So I think what I'm hearing, but I'll come to you next, Julie Marie, is that you all would like the language expanded for AMLF and FFF to be able to accommodate the new farm, like, or I don't know how to
New
word that.
ownership
New
structure.
ownership.
But yeah, at a minimum, new ownership of
Yeah.
existing farms.
Yeah.
Or
rather than a start
transition.
from scratch or transition, yeah.
Yeah, I get maybe why that was there, and they might have been thinking they don't wanna, give money to somebody that's never had any experience, but that's not the case in most of these transitions.
Okay.
And the
thank
other
you, Julie Marie.
Potential way to structure that is just to make it available as a waiver so that as we are determining eligibility, we have the opportunity to grant eligibility to people who do not technically meet all of those things. So then we can count transitions in, we can count somebody who's moving to Maine with their business. Like, there's a lot of different things that we could discuss to capture the gray area.
Okay, well then, Andy, I have no idea what your name tag is. We know who you are, but you're not Randall.
Not Randall, no.
Julie Marie.
Miriam just said what I was hoping to encapsulate. I think if there's some discretion, and I don't know if that needs to be written into the legislation. So that's a flag there for legislative language required. But to give that kind of discretion, I think that would go a long way towards making Farms for the Future more accessible. And we wouldn't have to put in long language, or we wouldn't have to classify new and define it. Because there already are programs for brand new, no experience, just coming in, just starting. And I think we wanna delineate between those types of programs.
Sure. Okay, I think we got that covered then. Miriam, just so you know, what I'm gonna be trying to do is get a revised full draft report to the commissioner by the end of Monday. And so any revised language for subsection 1. And I don't think we're talking, and maybe we're talking about for subsection 2, I'm not sure. We'll need to go back and forth on.
Let's discuss at the break.
Okay,
And
Other
one
thing-
last thing on that, to Steve's comment about making sure dairy improvement fund can be accessed by processors, not just producer dealers, but those who are doing solely processing. I think it's a very minor change, but it might make the world a difference for some folks.
do others agree with that? That change? Okay, all right, I'm saying largely yes, so we'll make that addition as well. Miriam.
I wanted to ask a question. I know in Representative Plucker's comments that he was asking for more specificity. I'm not sure when AMLF and DIF were started. Farms for the Future was started in 2000, and that's when those current numbers were set. If we just base it off of inflation, since then, we would raise the cap of 25K to about 45K and a cap of 250K to about 450K. Question is, do we want to be more specific about when we're saying increase the funding? Do we want to be specific about what our ideal would be and what kind of basis do we want to use? Inflation was the only thought that I had quickly.
That was a good blueprint, good thought.
I do just happen to have in front of me that AMLF was started in 1996.
Mm.
And it was a bond, and then there was another $1 million added to it in 2007. So, yeah, to your point, a while ago.
Okay, so we're gonna add that level of specificity of increasing the cap on both of the pieces of that program. All right, thank you. Anything else that you flagged in the public comments? And we'll obviously get to Representative Kluger's piece about the real estate tax in a subsequent recommendation. Look at that one. Yeah.
No, never mind.
I don't know that did we look at those, at, Bill Eldridge's point about the sales tax of food?
Yeah, that struck me like a lightning bolt. And I was kind of like, huh, why have we never talked about this entire time?
Yeah, I don't think,
Because
I
you
mean,
know, 1% sales tax on food,
So we
that's a
did,
lot of money.
so
we talked about it briefly, right? Like,
not as a full
not as a
group,
whole group, but-
at a subgroup that met just a couple weeks ago on funding. There was quite a bit of discussion about that, and what I pulled from that conversation was the sentiment that with food insecurity
Yeah.
and just the challenges generally economically, that would not play well.
Yeah.
And so I left it alone.
Just wanted to share that I just got an email from Bill that he's stuck in traffic on Intropic, so if that
Okay,
suggests anything, the order of when we consider things, but he is trying to get here.
okay, thank you.
I remember the conversation, we didn't want to tax. We don't mind the tax the whole food system because
Yeah.
that makes it harder to get through.
I saw that comment when I was reading through these yesterday and I can't believe we haven't really thought about that because and I started to look and there are states that tax food at a lower rate than, 1.5%, something like that. And, we've talked about where do we want to get money from? Well, we don't want to tax other industries, et cetera. And it's like, I think everybody here could agree that, food costs, by design are low. People don't pay enough for food, pay us farmers, and the percentage of every dollar that we get is small. So why not take it off the top? 1% across retail food sales is pretty low for a consumer. But it's a huge funding mechanism. Like that could fund programs for the entire state's, food system. Like, Jenny's talked about looking at this as a larger systemic question, right? It's like a 1.5% tax could fund, and I'm sorry, I know it's not gonna happen today. We're at the end of the thing. I wish we'd done this on day one, but it's like,
It's not
that's
that
a
it's
lot,
not that
that's a lot of money that could fund, an entire program for Maine's food economy, sector, processing, farming, to fund all these things, the dairy initiatives,
So this is the time to raise these issues, and if all of you think that's a stellar idea, there is the opportunity to add that. The vibe I was getting from the funding subgroup was
politically untenable.
not supportive of that, but that was a subgroup, it wasn't the full task force, so if you wanna be talking about that today, we can do that. Julie.
I worry significantly about us bringing up any defined funding mechanisms. Just because I'm very concerned about when this goes to the legislature, then we have to advocate for it. Well, if somebody's just skimming through, that's something that's gonna catch their attention and it's gonna suck all the energy away from all these other recommendations that are very solid and we've all defined as very necessary. And as much as, farmers take a very responsible approach, we wanna take care of ourselves. And that's fabulous, but in this case, I think funding the programs is firmly in the purview of the legislature, not this subgroup, and there was nothing in the resolve that forces us to talk about funding as an aspect, and I'm just afraid that it will distract from the other things that we're trying to push forward.
I will say there's nothing in the resolve that prohibited us from talking about
Nope.
funding, and I have heard from some folks in the legislature that, I mean, again, to Representative Cooper's point, be specific, you know, they need us to generate ideas so that they have something to work with.
So there's a general perspective, I would say, you know, Julie Marie's kind of at the 30,000 foot level, like any discussion of any of these various types of funding sources doesn't feel aligned for her. For those of you who do want to be talking about specific funding sources, if you want to be, I'm hearing one voice so far that thinks that a low tax on food writ large is a good idea. I'm just trying to get a sense if any others of you think that's a good idea, such that we should be talking about it further.
I don't think it's a bad idea to suggest some possible sources of funding. But I do agree that, you know. Yeah, they shouldn't be a forceful focus of what we're doing, just here are some things we've thought about. I hear what you're saying, Steve, but I'm very opposed to any tax on food. That is gonna be incredibly unpopular, it's incredibly regressive, you know. And much more like the idea of taxing, you know, real estate on high value homes as we're seeing inequality soaring than a regressive tax on food, so. Yeah.
John?
I'm opposed to a tax on any food. But I think it should be a suggested list of these are possible funding sources. To give them something to look at, let the legislature be the bad person. Not us.
Okay, well,
But
we are,
farms themselves don't want to be funded by a state check. But we can't get the pay price we need, so if we have to, then let's go to the top of the list and be the first one getting paid out of the chain instead of the last one.
That was really my perspective on it.
And Jody, I'd just like to clarify my position on this. I'm not opposed to having within the report notes from our discussions on this, so it is contained in the report, but I'm concerned about it as a standalone recommendation. So, I mean, I think we can provide the information, but
I wouldn't put it as the only one, put it as a list, the whole list of getting suggestions.
okay, I think even, I'm hearing pretty strong objection to including a food tax even within a list of options. There are some who think, you know, maybe I'm in there, but I'm opposition from others about even including it. So if we're trying to reach consensus here, my inclination is that we would not include it. Strong feelings otherwise, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, I'm gonna ask one more time about the public comments as a whole. And if there's anything else from the public comments that you want to talk about before we move into recommendation one, because we will go through each one of the recommendations.
Andy just brought up the potential, one of the suggestions was the tax on high value property. Do we want to include that in the list?
So we're gonna get to that in recommendation 3.
Okay.
Because I added language that's fairly explicit about that.
Lee Chase, I see that you're off mute.
Thank you. I was trying to find my hand button, but I'm struggling finding it. I just, you know, if anything, I just wanted to voice my opinion around the food tax. I understand that might seem like a small percentage, but I will just share that the one thing that we hear loud and clear from our consumers is that the price of groceries continues to be higher than what it used to be. Just when we look at last year's cost of goods, and our customers have been, you know, very vocal about that. So it might seem like a small percentage, but it does add up, and there's some potential challenges that we'll be facing in the new year with, like, just some examples. We don't know what the port strike implications will be, the tariff implications. So we're really, there's a lot of uncertainties right now. So I'd just say an additional cost increase would be a burden for our consumers. So I just wanted to make sure I shared that point of view.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, we will move on to recommendation 1. All right, so quickly, just flag the changes that were made since the last time we saw this document. I changed the title of it, and it was after kind of a long back and forth with Julie Marie. That's like fully funding the peer program is misleading. And that really what we're talking about is making sure that the program is funded at the recommended cost of production level. And that's determined by an every 3-year cost of production study. And it's semantics, and maybe, people will just use the quick phrase anyway, but it seemed like it was important to say what we mean here and that was clearer. So that was one change. The other was I just sort of followed that thing through in the final paragraph of recommendation 1, where it's all in bold. I also did not refer to it as fully funding the tier program, but basing the tier program funding on a short-run rate. And rather than saying when fully funded, I put when funded in this manner. So those were the only changes to that recommendation. Does anybody have any changes that they would like to see to that particular recommendation? Online, I'll just rely on you. Okay,
The term recommended cost of production, cost of production study that we undergo every 3 years is it considered recommended, or that's data driven?
maybe get rid of the word recommended or no?
Because it's in rulemaking, which is subject to fluctuation. Recommended is probably the safe way to view it, just because the committee can adopt the cost of production numbers by adjusting them via statute. When they do the rulemaking review as major substantive rulemaking, just like they did this last time, they actually adjusted the rule. So if you do the recommended, then you're referring to the original rule that is put before them.
Is that a level of nuance that will be lost on everybody except?
It's almost like we're putting 2 recommendeds, because if I was gonna read number 1, I would say, we recommend. Right?
Yeah.
But it's almost like we're recommending that they make the recommendation.
So think I'm hearing, to be clear, get rid of the word recommended. Right,
I don't know if you can completely just get rid of the word without changing.
fund the tier program at the cost of production level,
Yeah.
at the determined. I don't know.
As presented by the study data. Maybe if you have that clarifier in there.
Determined by study data, I don't know, the thing with titles is you like to keep them kind of short. Ethan.
Maybe it is fine for us.
So it
Determined cost of production level? I just recommend.
Calculated, something like that.
So there's calculated, there's determined, and there's nothing. Preferences?
Probably. I'd rather have nothing other than determined or calculated, just because I think, again, those open or refer to opportunities for the legislature to alter. And what you're trying to get is take the information, don't screw with it.
How about the full cost of production?
Yeah.
Or current, you could replace it with
Mhm.
current,
Because it's
funded here at the current cost of production level.
current, going once,
Current works,
okay. And
because it does change.
okay, great. Anything else on recommendation 1 before we move on to 2? All right, on recommendation 2, there was a fair amount that I modified here, and it was try to make it clear really what the process is that the legislature goes through to determine baseline funding, or to determine how much money will be allocated to the tier program. So the first 2 paragraphs, or much of the first 2 paragraphs, were revised to clarify how that process works. And on and in the final paragraph of that section, you'll recall that we were sort of toying with a particular figure that this baseline funding ought to be. But we were also recognizing that if we based it strictly on historical allocations, many of those years were underfunded, and so it was an inaccurate representation of what the need actually was. And so instead, we put a range in there based on historical data to the best of our ability. I also got rid of the dedicated account language, and that money, as a result of their no longer being referenced to a dedicated account, I got rid of the language that talked about rollover funding from one year to the next. And really the most vital piece of this, and this was because of a concern that Julie Marie raised, was, a general concern that she had about baseline funding at all, out of concern that it could potentially replace entitlement language that mandates full tier payments each month at established support levels. So I just tried to highlight that point at the end of that paragraph to make it super clear. So, thoughts about this particular recommendation? Julie?
Thank you, and I do like the revisions. It did address some of my concerns. I will say the first two paragraphs, I don't even think we need to put it in there. Everybody knows it's a complicated process, but actually the process of determining how much money gets put in the budget for the tier program has kind of gotten on a routine basis, appropriations knows that they need numbers from revenue forecasting gets my predictions. And it just sort of is a plug and play, knock on wood. But I don't think we need to, go through the detail, because for most people, it's an eye glaze over kind of detail. However, what's in bold there, in that second paragraph, I think definitely ought to stay in there. I'm also, I don't think, because of the way the month to month or the biennial budget funding takes place, I don't think we need to recommend a specific amount. Because again, that part is sort of automated in the process. Where it becomes an issue is when there are new cost of production levels being debated. And then it takes on a different level of political animal, but we're addressing that in one. So I think by putting in baseline, any recommendation for baseline funding, we're actually overcomplicating the system. And drawing focus away from focusing on fully funding the cost of production levels.
So let me just flag for your recollection. The reason we went down this path was a fair amount of discussion over the fact that when it's a really big number that the legislature has to grapple with is when it gets ugly. And are there any ways that you can have some level of baseline predictability so that the number that you're arguing about is a significantly smaller number? So that was the thinking behind this, and I just want to get others' perspectives on hearing Julie Marie's concern, whether you share that concern or whether you think that this is an effective potential way to address that problem.
I will just add that, just to note that the legislature turned over, and in fact, we have a kind of a big cohort, a new cohort coming in, and so if you're thinking about whittling this down or eliminating it, just try to think about what people won't know necessarily seeing the door, because they haven't been a part of the conversation.
So others' perspectives on how this is written currently.
I mean, I think it's an important point that we that we explicitly say that there is a requirement for revenue forecasting, but it's like an impossible number to actually give them. Because nobody forecasts milk further than 18 months out.
Right, but
No,
they
wait,
have,
wait, wait, like, just wanna, I get it, we could have it back and forth, I
Yeah.
just wanna hear everybody's perspective.
Like that's something that in our work at the legislature, we found that legislators have been like, oh, really? They don't know that, so I think explicitly saying that is important. I would definitely not scrap the first two paragraphs.
Others either on those two paragraphs or this issue of baseline funding.
I think even to say that we can forecast milk for 8 months out is almost an impossible task. And I think we're seeing it right now. I don't know exactly how it's panning out, but I mean, when we see that huge, when the legislature sees that huge number, whether it's right or wrong, and then we get that they say, oh, no, there's no way we can fund that. And then a few months later, we find out that the price of milk came up, but not to the level enough to still cover our short run break even. And then we're in that position where a lot of the farms aren't getting a tier payment because the price of milk has come up. And that would be fine if we were at the fully funded or cost reduction, but so. Yeah, I don't know, that was our intent, was that to let the legislature know that we can't, or not, no one can forecast that far out.
Mhm. Others' perspectives on this whole recommendation as written.
I feel the first two paragraphs need to stay because we are constantly turning legislature over. Right now, we're fortunate we have Julian there for how long, who knows? The next one may have to be fully re-educated. As far as having a funding number sitting there, I think that's fine. If we had 10 million always allocated to it, we need to only go fight for 3 million. That's easier than fighting for 13, right? So if you had a baseline some month, it was always gonna be there. Use it or not.
Others. And,
I agree with what these guys have said, I think that they should be there.
okay.
I mean, I think it's a lot of extra writing, I know, but we're gonna change legislatures all the time. We're gonna change Julie at some point.
Not for another 25 years, I'm sure.
No plan.
no comment.
No, but our job dealing with NDIA is constantly going back and educating people. It's already written in, we got something to base off from.
Okay, I am hearing generally, notwithstanding your points, Julie Marie, and I'll take you next. I'm hearing generally that you want this to remain as is. Julie Marie.
My last comment is you're always gonna have to educate legislators, assuming that they're going to get a proper education from this document. You might get a few when we first deliver it to the legislature, but it's not a document that's gonna be in front of them. It's an ongoing process, and there's a phrase that is used all the time in the appropriation committee, notwithstanding any other provision of law. It doesn't matter what we put in there for a baseline if the political inclination is not to fund it. You throw in that language and they can do whatever they want. And so I don't want anybody to go away with the assumption that if we put this in, it's protected, we're safeguarded. Because that's not how the beast works, the legislative dynamic. So that's it.
Understood, okay. All right, well, appreciate the back and forth. I'm inclined to move us on and keep this as is and tackle the next one. All right, recommendation 3. The changes that were made here were in the second paragraph. I just acknowledged that you all considered a lot of different funding scenarios, and amongst them, you thought that there was a cadre that were reasonable alternatives for the legislature to consider. Sort of soften that language so as not to say, you know, the task force believes they ought to put a 2% tax on marijuana. So just try to kind of tone that down a little bit, but say we did our research and here's what seemed like it was the most logical. What I also added was the first bullet, which is pulled, the concept pulled from Representative Kluger's public comment. And tried to provide some rationale as to why that made sense, particularly since it has a direct impact on land. The other parts that I changed were in the third bullet that talks about adult use marijuana. We had originally put in there, I had originally put in there a specific increase, so it's a 13% because that mimics the national average or the median. I still, at age 60, confuse mean and median, whatever that middle number is, would have been 13%. And previously, that was in there and instead just said, an increase. This data points to, these data points to a potential to tax marijuana at a higher rate. Leave it to the legislature to decide whether they think that's a good idea, and if they do, to what degree. Similarly, in the final bullet, rather than putting a 5-cent tax, I just put adding pennies per pack, so make it clear that the intention was that it be very small. And that's it. So those were the changes. Thoughts on this? Julie Marie.
Okay, I have two. One is that we touched on it a minute ago. I don't think we ought to have language saying develop funding sources, but maybe it say these were discussed. These were looked at as possible avenues rather than making it the force of a recommendation. Again, as I said before, I'm afraid it's gonna suck all the energy from our other proposals. And in line with that, I think this one ought to be further down the list of recommendations. Because if someone is reading through, they're gonna get caught on that one and they're gonna miss out on the rest, including the bond, which is a heavy lift, and some of these other things, and I just don't want to have those subsumed under this discussion that's gonna have a lot of outside forces driving the debate.
Sure. Okay, so 2 points there. One is maybe this shouldn't be stated as a recommendation, develop an additional funding source, but rather the task force considered additional funding sources, something like that, not to paraphrase. I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but there's that. The other is this in the right place? To the latter point, I will simply say that whatever you decide is fine. I lumped everything that had to do with the tier program together because there seemed to be some sort of logical sequence in doing so, but reactions independent of Julie Marie's points or in response to her points.
So possible funding at the end of the whole thing. This is what we recommend. This is somehow staying developed or making additional, but the listings, funding sources that we may have looked at. Or could suggest the legislature to look into. I understand where it is because it has to do with the peer program, but I'm just wondering if we'd be better off with a funding suggestion at the end of everything.
Yep, okay, that's great. Steve and then Marion.
My initial thought was just what you said. I worry whether that would have the two there and then they decide one or the other, or and I understand why you had it where you did as a logical place to be included with the tier program comments. So there again, I don't have any strong feeling, but those are the two issues I see. I didn't want to have those get lumped together and and take away the punch on either one.
The bond and
Exactly.
yeah, got it, okay. Miriam and then Annie.
I kind of was gonna say a similar thing, that I think some of our discussions about these funding sources were specifically about the tier program, and some of them were about all of the other recommendations that are going to cost money. So does lumping it right next to the tier program make sense if we're open to and flexible with where the funding comes from and where it goes to? We have a lot of expensive recommendations.
We have a lot of expensive recommendations, but our top recommendation is to fund the tier program at the cost of production numbers. I think we agree as a committee that that's the most effective way and most, it's the best way to get money directly into dairy farmers' hands. And so I think taking the opportunity for suggesting this additional funding sources and putting it anywhere at the end of the whole report, it says like, you could look at all these ways of funding everything we just told you. Whereas putting it right here is saying, these are the things that we've discussed and think it's an opportunity to look at additional funding sources for this program that is so important. And then we go into talking about, you know, all the other opportunities for investment, yes, but we follow up that with, well, one way to invest in those opportunities is through a bond. Because we were really trying to differentiate between the bond, suggesting a bond pay for the tier program, because that's not what we're trying to say. So I think separating those two things is important. And I, would like to remind everybody, these are just suggestions. These are recommendations. We're not saying you guys have to do this as a legislative body, but we're saying to a citizen legislature who might not have any experience with sort of tax code or understanding how these programs, with this program in particular is funded, we're saying, here are some places that you should look as opportunities.
I'm gonna, okay, sorry, yes.
Because of the way it's laid out, you're talking about recommending that these alternative funding sources fund the tier, but the tier program is funded out of the general fund. We do not have a direct account that it goes into, it's out of the general fund. And so the idea that there is a direct linkage at all to anything in the tier really doesn't exist. It's a matter of what is in the budget capacity, big picture. So I think it makes sense to put these at the end and refer to all of the programs and maybe put a line in there that says, the tier is the most important thing to fund or something like that. But tying it to the tier specifically, while it works in the logic, that's not the way it's gonna play out in the legislative discussion. And so I'm not, again, I'm concerned that it is gonna draw attention away from number one and some of the other ones that are equally important in terms of needing funding.
Others' reactions.
I would also lean towards moving it towards the back, mainly because. I don't think politically that, I think the first bullet point, I think there's, I can make the argument that farmland is being taken away, especially, either current farmland or future farmland is being taken away by homes. So I think we can make that argument. I don't think that we're ever gonna get into a current cascade, but potentially I'd like that idea of like having that in there, so if the opportunity was to come around, there is a new casino or something, we get in on the ground floor, because I think that's where you get in. I'd rather get on the ground floor than have the argument with all the other folks that are in the cascade, because that's a fight that I don't wanna have, but, and then, so I don't wanna put a lot of emphasis on the marijuana and the cigarette tax either, so I mean, I think we moved it towards the back. We wouldn't be sending the message that this was our third.
I see Libby has unmuted her mic. Libby, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I agree with moving it farther down. I thought the task force was to recommend that the TIF program be funded, but it wasn't our recommendation as to how to fund it. But we're offering these as suggestions, so if it's farther down on the list, I think it would be better.
Gotcha, thank you. Let me just get the other farmers around the table and first, and then everybody else, just want to make sure, but I am curious, Andy, Steve, who I missed, Steve. If you have perspectives on location.
I would tend to change my thoughts and have it at the end.
All right, and Andy?
I can see going either way, frankly. I think there are a lot of good points that have been made. It's a very vanilla response, but yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, I definitely, if we do move it to the back though, I would just make sure that there's something in there about the tier program being the most important funding requirement.
Got it. And then Steve?
I don't have a strong opinion.
Okay, all right, so then it gets to the question of, are you comfortable with the way in which this is titled?
Well, if we move it to the back, then I would just say develop additional funding sources for dairy programs, including the tier program. That's too long of a title, but that's why I need that first sentence to highlight the tier. I guess we do that. I also, I don't know, might just say the last sentence of the second paragraph that we conclude the following up reasonable alternatives might just like, I don't know. These are things that we discussed. I don't know how strongly we want to say that these are the alternatives that we're proposing. Just like, here's some ideas, but also like we discussed other things too, you know, it's just say basically it's like not limited to these. Because there are other ideas I know that we discussed. Yeah.
So you discussed more than this.
To suggest versus develop, or as first.
So let me just back up. You did discuss a number of funding options that you thought were bad ideas, you know, funding just dairy products, you know, sorry, taxing, putting an additional tax on strictly dairy products. I could mention all the things that you talked about. I could mention only the ones that you think are better ideas than those. I can be explicit to say that you believe that an additional funding source should be developed, and these are some ideas. Or I could be even more generic and say, these are some funding ideas that the group discussed, without saying that you're recommending that the legislature develop one of them. There are a lot of options here.
I think what was just said about, you know, to suggest that the legislature consider, that might be a lighter language.
I just also wanted, you know, to somehow keep it broader too, to not say that like, these were the only things that we think could be reasonable. You know, I know that these were the ones that had like the most support behind them, but just.
Kind of suggesting a list. That list would be what we talked about. Not really picking any one over the other, but it gives them, they want a list of, I guess, the way to go. Wants some direction, so we need to give something for a list, not necessarily this is number one, this is number two, this is just a list that we.
Okay.
I think it might be a good idea to cross the word tier out of there and use something else. I mean, we've got basically 12 different. 13 is the bond, so 12 different ideas, so I think it will be insinuated that. That's the funding sources for all of our ideas. Without like, I don't know, legally, I don't know if we wanna talk about that, cause then we gotta talk about where's that gonna go, we have to have a standalone account, can it go into the general fund, just leave it alone and let them figure it out later.
So develop additional funding sources for the dairy sector is another way that I could put it, and include the bond under that as one of the items, so that becomes, you know, yet another funding source. How
Maybe
does,
say like dairy support programs. Or just say there.
Just real quick, it's, I mean. We're giving them a list of the things that we've thought about, right? But they're no dummies, they're gonna think about where they're gonna get it from, so really what we're trying to say is. Here's some ideas that farmers think would be cool. Just so they have an idea of what their constituency is sort of thinking, right? And then you're like, yeah, that won't work, that won't work. Oh, this one, that's a good idea. If we got farmers on board and we're on board with it, right? Like that's,
okay,
so maybe it's not,
The jumping off. point.
maybe they got a way better idea. I don't.
Yeah.
It's levy a 50% tax on food.
Nothing that says milk on the label that isn't.
There we go,
Yeah.
yeah.
Annie,
So I guess my question is, if we're okay putting this at the end, that means we're okay with developing different funding sources for, that they could then say, all right, let's put this money into the dairy improvement fund, not the tier. I'm trying to prevent them from giving them an alternative to, like, we don't need to fund the tier, let's support all these other things they've recommended, when our top recommendation is to support the tier. So.
You're gonna run that risk
Miriam,
anyway.
Miriam,
Can it say that? Like, again, we can reiterate in this, like, there are many funding options. It is our priority that the tier program be funded. These may also, in addition, support the other programs that have been recommended.
I think that's what Andy was saying, that if it gets moved to the end, there needs to be a statement, a sentence, first sentence.
Yeah.
That clarifies that. Okay.
If you're opening any of these stuff, don't forget about us.
all right, so then two last questions maybe, develop additional funding sources for dairy support programs. You like that title?
Especially the tier.
That would be the first paragraph.
The first sentence.
And secondly, where would you like to see the bond in this list?
I think there's some merit to putting the bond higher on the list. And talk about, how many things it could cover. In fact, we could talk about it, covering a large number of the other recommendations and then say, something. And as far as, additional funding required, such as for the tier program, additional ongoing funding required. There could be other sources, here's a list.
Miriam,
Could it say something like, many of these recommendations above will require higher investments at their outset in order to accomplish these? A bond would be the right option, basically, for the recommendations that have a high startup. This is what we would recommend.
so far what I'm hearing is that you'd like to see, we're gonna combine recommendations 3 and 14. We're gonna move it to the lab to be the last recommendation, and we're gonna list the bond first in that list. Okay, all right, let's move on.
Can we, before we just move on to the next recommendation, I just, the bullet about adult use marijuana, that's a term that, I know, if you look it up on the state, website, it references that when we say adult use, we're talking about recreational use. I just wonder if we can make that a little bit more clear, because not everybody's familiar with that terminology. Because I think we had discussed not including medical marijuana in this recommendation, so making that a little bit clearer and not just relying on that.
When you say that, the first thing I thought is everybody's just gonna get their kids to buy their pot for them, so.
So I can just put recreational and parenthetically right after adult use.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Let's then move on to number 4. We're gonna make the changes that we talked about right at the outset of subsection 1. I'll work with Miriam on that. We will be referencing higher caps. And we will be adding language that addresses new ownership of existing farms or farms that are transitioning from one generation to the next. We'll think about a possible mechanism for doing that, possibly a waiver, something that provides discretion. We'll figure that out, but that'll be the tenor of those changes. And Commissioner Beal and I and Annie and Keith had a brief conversation with Hannah Carter, who is the Dean of Cooperative Extension, earlier this week to talk about the way subsection 3 is worded, just because it references cooperative extension, so we wanted to make sure that, she felt that that was appropriately worded. Her own suggestion was that rather than she basically wanted to ensure that any additional cooperative extension technical specialist had particular expertise in dairy, but might not necessarily have to be exclusive to dairy. And so one change would be by increasing the number of humane cooperative extension specialists with dairy expertise. And that at least suggests that it could have expertise beyond that. And that was the only place where we landed on that conversation. So thoughts about this recommendation in general. Hi, Bill. Sorry for your troubles.
It was
Big troubles.
Great, tractor trailer went off the highway.
So first Ethan and then Marion.
I felt passionate about this one, so I'm really glad that you talked to Extension to get their input. Did they say anything about like, has there been a precedent set for cooperating with other universities, or is she like, yeah, you can say that, but just any feel for that stuff at all?
She didn't have any reaction to that I'm recalling.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
It just seems like,
We didn't really ask for that though either.
I mean, I did provide her with that explicit language in the email, so she had it verbatim and didn't raise a concern.
I feel like that's key. I feel like that's something that we have had in the past and other states have, and maybe could use one. That's.
Yeah.
I really like that.
I think the vehicle was confusing about was how would that happen? Would that go through extension? Would that go through the department? That was sort of the like momentary conversation we have about it.
Yeah, and there wasn't,
We
what
haven't
I
really
heard, kind of a
figured it out.
perspective on being more specific about it. If you all would like to be more specific about that, we could.
Well,
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I think it just really comes down to funding, whether it is the department or public extension or whoever, there just needs to be. So I think that comes back around to why it is important to give some possible funding sources for everything we're talking about.
I think if we added something in there that said through investment or providing additional funding, again, to follow up, because extension
Yeah.
is not gonna have the capacity to add a new position without additional funding. So at least you've got the legislature thinking that there's an action for them, as opposed to just saying extension do that, and then the legislature does not necessarily feel like they have anything that they have to do.
For sure. Just 1 second, Miriam, and then I'll take you. We did have that, we did discuss that a little bit on this call with Hannah Carter, basically trying to understand how have these positions have there been other alternative ways in which these positions have been funded in the past? And there was some conversation about a extension economist. Do I have that? Hi, name?
No, but that's kind of where we get at,
No.
with, like,
Yeah.
with dairy. That's kind of where we were talking about with dairy specialty, like that person might be an
Mhm.
economist that might work with other.
Oh, yeah,
aspects.
okay, so sorry, that basically, would likely need to start with some grant funding, it's the bottom line. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to give some like information and news and context about cooperative extension right now. There is a hiring freeze. They did just lose the last person to be employed in Aroostook County. Aroostook County does not currently have any extension agents. And that's not going to change because of the hiring freeze. This is true in every state. Federal funding for extension has slowly dropped off. Every state has had to choose either to meet that demand or not. Maine has not really done that. So this is a problem in dairy. This is a problem broadly in agriculture. Extension does not have capacity to help even a fraction the amount that they used to or would like to in any industry.
With all of that context, are there, other than being more explicit about the need for funding, an alternative funding source for this, are there any other changes that you'd like to see to recommendation for?
Should we state in there something, knowing that federal funding has dropped off over the years, we would recommend the state help fill that gap? I mean, I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but
I think that like having this in there, I don't think that any of us believe that university is just gonna do it because we asked them to do it, but that alternative funding is gonna have to be required. We have to do that one way or the other, whether it be state or federal. I don't know, maybe we can get more specific.
Well, I can make sure that I add in that alternative funding, it will be needed to accomplish this.
I do remember speaking with an extension person in the past who was like, and now I have to do rabbits too. No offense, I don't mean that, I just mean like sometimes they're like, funding's gone and I gotta take on this and so I'm not trying to
Yeah.
mess up their requirements.
Would it be, I'm just wondering if testing this out, would there be any interest in including some kind of a sentiment or a sentence about overall the task force, you know, supports additional resources to strengthen our cooperative extension?
Sure.
Whether
Yeah.
that be federal or, you know,
It's just the structure's there, why do we wanna reinvent the wheel if the structure's there?
Mhm. Okay. Awesome. Anything else on this one? So just, pause here for a moment. I'm just trying to think, would you like to keep where I have public input right now, it's kind of in the middle, what time is it? How are we doing? Yeah, would you like to continue on? I think we'll want to take a break within 10 minutes. We could take public comment right before a break to have it inform the rest of your thinking around recommendations, or we could keep it at the end. Do it now? Okay, all right, so, anybody online, public members that would like to, provide comments? Of course, I left my distance glasses in the car, but,
You have assistants.
I'm not seeing any big icon. Okay, I think
Jenny.
Jenny, there you go. Go
Relay
ahead.
system.
Hi, thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and for all the work on this. I know I say it every time, but I truly appreciate it. Also, I really truly appreciate how all the conversations and discussions and public comment have been distilled down into what is really a compact and well-written recommendation draft. However, I will couch that with saying that I truly thought at the end of this process that there would be more of a call to action for how do we invest in our food system through our dairy farms and our dairy businesses throughout the state. And that would have been the focus as opposed to some of the other more detailed strategy, which I think is all important, but I think some key points were missing. And I don't know how to say it otherwise, but I really just, I will go by recommendations that I thought maybe we're missing a little bit, or maybe could be attitude, or maybe it's too late for it. But I think at the end of the day, John said it really well, that we can't get the pay price we need. And while the tier program is crucially important for us as a dairy farm business throughout the state and all of the businesses that are related to it in our food system, the tier program is something we want to be able to rely upon when needed and lean upon if needed. It is not something I don't think any of us want to consider as part of our business plan. We want it to be a risk management tool. So it is crucially important that it be prioritized, it be mentioned first off and foremost as being something that everyone is in favor of supporting, and that we need to make sure that it is funded. However, I wonder where are the specific supports for all the other parts of how to be far more successful as a dairy farm business in the state of Maine, because as we know, Maine is special. We get an asterisk in a lot of benchmarks because of the higher costs. We know firsthand from many of those who are on the task force that just the idea of trying to find grain is limited by a lack of competition, by lack of accessibility, affordability, and availability. And we know that other grain is, limited because of lack of infrastructure for our own infrastructure. So I guess I'm wondering, is there space in some of the other recommendations to focus on how to support our dairy farm businesses in lowering the inputs and lowering the cost of doing business in the state of Maine, which is worth every penny. No one wants to leave, but is there a way to make it easier for everyone and also help businesses flourish? And I don't know if that is in recommendations 12, 13, and 14, and that, making sure that it isn't specifically incumbent upon the Department of Ag, Conservation and Forestry, and isn't specifically required to be the work of dairy farmers or funding for dairy farmers, but is there work that can be done, investments that can be done that not only help these other businesses of service providers and stakeholders be able to conduct their businesses in a far more efficient and sustainable way that can be passed on directly to us and help them flourish, but also can help encourage others to enter the space while also settling the things that we dairy farmers can. And right now we can't settle the high prices due to lack of accessibility to a competitive market for certain items. We cannot overcome being last on the rail, the last on the road, but are there ways that we can help settle those things? And I feel like it can be done, but that funding and that direction of that programming would go towards other businesses, not necessarily our farmyards. And I'm not saying that we should take money away from farmers, but I think that in order for our entire food system to perform better, that we need to look at it as being all-inclusive, and the entire value chain needs to be prioritized. I know you can't prioritize everybody and put them all at the top of the list, but I want that magic to happen, and I feel that the people in this room and on this task force have the ability to do that. And I have one final thing. It's minor, I know that I don't always come up with the minor, easy things, but in the second paragraph on the draft, you're talking about all the amazing parts and parcels of how dairy is such a wonderful part of nutrition and sustainable nutrition. I was wondering if we could possibly add iodine to the list of gifts that dairy brings us, because it is becoming more and more apparent how important iodine is to cognitive and other development for young people and as well as adults. And iodine is readily available in dairy. And if needed, we can make sure that you have the data for that. But I just thought it would just be a good ad, like a positive ad. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Other members of the public that would like to make a comment to the group?
Is there anybody further? No, I'm looking at the complete list. Oh, another hand up from Jenny.
Jenny, you have something further that you wanted to share?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had one specific thing with regards to, I think it was recommendation 7, the improve the cost of production study, data collection and participation. I really appreciate all the work that went into that recommendation, but I do think, and it was discussed, I think to some great extent, that it is a lot to do with the responsibility and standard of participation that farmers provide. And we also discussed that a lot of it has to do with whether farmers have the resources or equipped with the ability to provide the data that is necessary. But I do think it needs to be specifically called out, and I wish it was specifically called out to say that, yes, farmers who are receiving the benefit of this investment of this program do meet and exceed the criteria needed to make sure that the data they provide is of a level that meets the transparency and trust that our taxpayers and the contributors require. And how that gets done means people have to make lifts, but I do think it should be specifically called out that there is a responsibility for us as dairy farmers to be a part and parcel of our solutions. Thank you. I promise I'm done now.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Jenny, I had a question, and so you're talking about investments in main food systems. And admittedly, I'm probably the stupidest one in the room, but can you like lay out a few things of what you're talking about there? I mean, you are at 10,000 feet way above my head.
So I guess I was specifically talking about our present stakeholders and service providers limited by what it costs to do business and their limitations on infrastructure. No matter how much money they dump into a siding, are they still having to truck up to Waterville to get their grain? And does that actually increase the cost for Maine dairy farmers? Yeah. Is there a barrier to inducing or enticing organic grain production and or processing or facilitating the ease of distribution in the state of Maine that can be conquered outside of the department and more so with economic development or otherwise? What about the challenges faced by service providers that we depend upon, such as veterinarians? We know that at the federal level, there is an extension and increase proposed with regards to grants for rural development. How do we make sure that those stakeholders are able to obtain that, and how can we translate that to meaningful impacts on our dairy farms who are increasingly dependent upon those vets? But we know very well that it is really hard to travel all those miles and make sure that it is sustainable for our large animal vets to maintain a business on that side. What about other aspects that make it more of a problem? Have the programs that we're utilizing on the business side and the tax side, have they grown with our dairy farm infrastructure? Are all the businesses, whether they're equipment or not, what did those folks have to say? Were they asked during this process? Those are the specific things I was referring to, that there are so many people that are engaged in this. And what about our processors? What about our retailers? Are there specific challenges that they see in getting the product from point A to point B that is beyond the farmyard, that they're like, we've seen this work here, or we think that this might be beneficial here in Maine because it is a special situation. Those are the types of things. I don't have any more specifics than that. And I certainly don't think you're the stupidest person in the room. I don't think anybody qualifies for that.
Thank you, Jenny. I did write down railroad, so I had that.
Andy?
I was just gonna ask it, I mean, if there's any potential, we could expand. Item number 12 deals directly with dairy feed availability. We could maybe expand that note to include, supports the infrastructure, and talk about the feed, but then we could also talk about, I don't know, I have no idea what kind of programs could be implemented, like say help, keep large animal veterinarians in the state and things like that, but just to at least make that note, because that is a growing challenge. And just getting access to, I live 3 miles from one, and just getting a phone call is hard. So
They don't teach that part of school.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think to that point, if you look at recommendation, what is now 14, we're we talked about the dairy farm, there's a sort of a list of things that funding could support. And I think what Jenny's getting at is that, you know, there's a need for a lot of things, but there's a need for investment in, we've talked about this before, like just in efficiency on farm and upgrading equipment and things like that, infrastructure investments, but also opportunities to reduce the cost of inputs or solve bottlenecks and other supply chain challenges. But we could probably come up with 1 or 2 bullets to add to that list to signal that these are other types of things that a dairy bond could perhaps address. Just a thought.
Yeah, one thing that I'll note, although maybe it was. The symmetry is only evident to me and it doesn't matter, is that those bullets. Reflect recommendations 4 through. 12, basically, and we could certainly address, I mean, so there's no reason why it has to be limited to that, but currently that's the way it's structured. Okay, not to get us to, I'll take you in just one second, Ethan, but not to get us too derailed, but there was one other point that Jenny made that I just wanted to ask you all about, and it had to do with the cost of production study. And whether I had thought, or at least it was my intention to kind of try to capture what if I understand your point correctly, that the task force recommends that as part of the next cost of production study, data collection methodology be reviewed and identify approaches that will result in greater and more consistent farmer participation and ensure robust and accurate data collection. It's not saying every farmer must, but that was the intent. So I just wanted to check whether you are all feeling like that is sufficient language. Julie Marie, and then I missed somebody.
I have one question. Is the intent of this to tie participation in the cost of production study to receiving payments? Because it could be construed that way, the way it's laid out a little bit. And then okay, if not, when we're looking at the structure of the cost of production study, the structure is, well, I hate to be a broken record, but it's something that it will, anything beyond the current methodology process, which is a 2-stage process with an individual investigator, would be the next leap up is technology, and that's another significant investment. So just want everybody to be mindful that those are the options we're talking about.
Sure. I think somebody had their hands raised. Sorry, thank you, Ethan.
So I was just, I'm not trying to upset the apple cart, but it occurred to me that maybe what Jenny was talking about a little bit was like recommendations for direct support and indirect support to dairy. And so like the direct support would obviously be tier money, extension for specifically dairy, like most of our recommendations, right? But then some of the indirect ones would be like, don't forget, we're affected by this too. Railroad problems, grain growing in Maine, which we all think of as specifically dairy, but people who are growing it are not thinking of themselves as connected to dairy. You know, if we could get the potato guys in, you know, give them some opportunity to grow grain that we could feed, that'd be great. Especially if it was organic, whatever, right? So some of those things that are like, as they read it, they're like, oh yeah, my constituents are hauling about this too, or there's another thing. They can start to connect 2 or 3 things together and say, hey. Maybe if we made a recommendation that sort of said indirect, but problems in Maine that we're also dealing with. Especially transportation, railroad, cooperative extension, technical services, other economic development, the Dirigo business incentives that starting January 1st comes to mind with capital improvements. That's the text.
I'm gonna take Miriam and then take a break.
On that similar note, I think one thing to just gonna throw it out there, maybe you all strike it. I would add to this list personally rural infrastructure, roads, railroad, sure, but also just internet access. These are things that matter to dairy farms, but they also improve the quality of life and cost of living for people like veterinarians. And, you know, we lose, for example, extension folks in Aroostook because it's tough to live in Aroostook, especially if you didn't grow up there. And so there's high turnover. And so just improving the quality and cost of living in some of these rural spaces, I think is a real benefit to the broader infrastructure.
Okay, well, I will find a way to make reference to that in what is now going to be a combined number 3 and number 14. And I will probably try to figure out a way to make general reference to that point in some introductory, paragraphs as well. Let's hit pause. Thank you very much.
We're recording.
Okay. So we're on to recommendation 5. And I would say that I changed nothing in that recommendation since the last we saw it, other than there was an error in subsection B, where I talked about, Hood's Portland plant providing a stable local market for 2/3 of Maine's farms, when in fact it's 2/3 of Maine's milk production. So that has been corrected, but otherwise I don't think I made any changes. So any comments on that one? And I did not make any changes to the next one either. On the point that I just kind of asked an open question about right before the break on number 7, whether you feel that the way the last 2 sentences in that are worded is sufficiently responsive or to Jenny's point about farmer responsibility for good outcomes here. Julie Marie.
2 comments about when you're considering this, keep in mind, this is conventional farms only in the cost of production study. If we want to do anything, I know it was mentioned one of the comments about a separate organic level, it would require a separate study and a separate module of calculation programming. But the other thing in this is that the greatest challenge in gathering data comes from the largest number of the sector with the largest number of farms. The tier 1 farms are the hardest ones to collect data from. Mostly because they have very little extra labor to, so it's taking time out. And they are most likely to still be using either hand-based data collection, financial collection, or, it's kind of a little bit more of a challenge to gather that data. And I don't necessarily see that changing unless there's some kind of big external push to get everybody on QuickBooks or something like that.
Sure. So are you comfortable with not mentioning that, not being, just not being any more explicit?
I would just. Well, I feel like this is maybe for maybe Julie Marie and MDIA to discuss. I don't know if it's a legislative thing. I mean, we've had discussions already, but I mean, maybe prior to the next study, we just need to figure out a way to not incentivize, but activate farmers so that they're ready for it. And we do our best every time, but I don't know if we could brainstorm some ideas, but I'm not sure that legislators will help us do this. So
I was just thinking that these are recommendations to the legislature,
Yeah.
so I think that.
So do you want to eliminate this recommendation?
I think so.
The only thing I'd say is there is still a funding challenge, like everything else, in ensuring that these studies continue. And so, whether you want to include that in something else, or if you want to not mention that, and we can take that up at in a different venue.
Well, so
that's
two
up to you.
ideas. One is that you eliminate the recommendation and you don't mention the funding need either. Another one is that the combined recommendation of 3 and 14 include reference to, maybe it already does, and I can see.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, yeah, it is listed there. So it isn't, that wouldn't be lost, I guess is the point. Bill?
Julie, the legislature that created, the legislation that created the tier thing, did it require the economic study?
The economic impact
I mean,
or the cost of production?
Cost of production.
It piggybacked on an already existing requirement in statute for the milk commission purposes. So the milk commission already has to do this study every 3 years, but what the milk commission is required to do is a much more streamlined, central. And now that we have to do tier information to meet the statutory requirement there, it makes it a slightly more complicated study and has been requiring a larger sample size.
Okay, so basically, the format is not legislatively defined.
No, just the outcomes.
Okay. Second question is, does all the reference only refer in any of the legislation to just dairy farms as opposed to regular and organic?
Because everything is based on the federal order. It's not specifically said, but it's not said, but it's said that the comparison is between the federal order conventional price and the calculated cost of production price, which is meant to tip off the federal price. So that's the connection. It does not specifically say that organic is opted out. And we actually do survey, I started surveying organic for the demographic study. But it's a different comparison. Does that make sense?
So Bill, I just want to get to what's your underlying concern or do you have one?
Okay. Studies are dependent on the input. If the input is not restricted, then one of the things that can be done is as part of the sample, then organic farms could be included as part of it, which would effectively increase the average cost.
It would increase it, but you're not talking apples and apples, and I think then we might have a credibility issue. If you're comparing it to the federal order price, because organic farms are not paid at the federal order price, they're paid at a price that's pegged at a different level. So the comparison in the payout might have to be, you might be able to do that, but you have to make an adjustment in the payout to be more reflective. I think it's actually more beneficial the way it is now for organic farms because they get.
We're all okay with that.
She's okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Wow. No, lost that train. Okay, number 8. Address interstate dairy product sales barriers. I made no changes to this one, nor to. Nor to the next 4. Go ahead.
I have just one clarification question. Was the intent was this talking about specifically raw milk products and the issue of crossing, or is this in general?
Good question.
Transition, because they do involve two different structural formats.
Andy, you raised this concern first early on, and then I think Steve Berger, you piggybacked on that. So I sort of looked to both of you as to your whether your original concern, whether this addresses it or not.
You go.
It had nothing to do with raw milk sales as far as I was concerned. I don't expect that to ever happen. But yeah, no, it was really just technical assistance on getting processed products, you know, out of state commerce.
Okay,
It's a barrier for a lot of people.
and that's more of a clarification for me because I can see the legislature asking for further clarification. Just because,
So does it seem like this is not worded, that there's a way that this could be worded to be clearer in that regard?
I think it's worded well, I just kind of know how some of the thought processes where they tend to go, and it's just helpful to have confirmation from this group that this is the area circled here that
Yeah,
people intend.
I definitely, I don't know, my mind definitely did not go to bottled raw milk crossing state lines when I read this, or definitely also for promoting. I think it's just hard as a small processor.
Question would be, is this something that the legislature is gonna tackle, or is this more something that maybe the department would just need to know that's on the minds of dairy farmers?
Yeah, I agree with that question. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the legislature can really do here, but I don't know. It's an issue for sure, but
You know, so one perspective would be to get rid of it for that reason. The other would be that this is, you know, partly an educational document to make the legislature aware of the challenges that the industry is having, and this is one of them. I could argue it both ways, so,
It's possible that it could be an add-on under 14. The first bullet is expanded on-farm technical service capacity. We could say including specific assistance in helping farmers to scale up and expand their sales territories or something like that.
And I think that connects to my comment would be is that what the legislature can and would need to do is figure out the funding piece.
Can I?
so move it to, yeah.
I mean, the real question around regulations and what, I mean, that's the federal level, so.
If it's really an educational piece too, does it help to be specific about something? Like, are we talking about, is it just getting through the regulations and rules, or is there one specific thing that you can't sell yogurt anywhere except Maine because of something? You know what I mean?
It's the whole thing is very confusing as a small value added processor as to like how you even go about selling stuff out of state. That no one seems to really be able to answer. And,
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about like.
So it ties into technical support, it ties into a whole bunch of different things, which I think is why it feels like a little bit of a weird
Yeah.
recommendation.
Okay.
Because it's,
All right, so
critical.
if I'm understanding correctly, I'm eliminating this recommendation. I'm adding reference to it into the first bullet under what's now the combined 3 and 14. Using it as an example under on-farm technical service capacity. For example.
Yeah.
But, okay,
All right, can I have a quick question?
Yeah.
Because it's all federal regulation that we're trying to wade through, correct?
It's federal.
Yeah.
If there were a state, some sort of state regulation, then I would say we should leave it in because that's where legislation.
Could
affects
be
that.
other states' regulation, but not ours.
right. Julie Marie, you had a kind of a pithy phrase. Do you mind texting me that right after the meeting?
Let me see if I remember it.
Yeah, so, yeah, and it's fine, it's just a jumping off point for me, I can modify it. Okay, then I think we're moving on to number 9, Resource Hub. And Amanda, I realized after we got off the phone with Hannah Carter that we didn't raise the fact with her that we made reference to University of Maine Cooperative Extension in this particular recommendation as well.
I had mentioned, I flagged that for her previously.
And she was comfortable with
That
that.
wasn't a problem.
Okay, great. So I made no changes to this since the previous time. Any changes that you'd like to see?
And it just comes to my mind that a lot of these things that we're just discussing, basically, what I would call more soft things in this recommendation. And the requirements are really, they are important to the farmers. But the problem is always going to get to be, how do you fund it? Because just the thought to have it is great, but until you get some funding source that makes these things happen, which is basically everything under 14.
Yeah, right. Okay. I don't want to speed us along if we don't, if you want to linger, but otherwise I'm gonna move us on to number 10. Yeah, Miriam.
I just wanted to inform everyone, MFRN, which is referenced in this recommendation, has been in discussions with service provider organizations basically across Maine, of finding a way to fund grant writing support provider. The difficulty is actually pulling together about $200,000 to get that position started, but just something to make you aware that MFRN is trying to kind of invest in these resources.
Great, thank you. All right, number 10, Farmer Learning Networks. Again, I made no changes to this. $11. Support farm transfers. And
So,
Yeah.
on 11, in the second paragraph, where we've already discussed about the eligibility and definition of which farmers would be included, do we need to extend that? It says AMLF expanded to enable new farmers. Should we include that expanded definition of, or reference to what a new farmer?
that would be consistent with what how we're
Right.
wording it in the.
We had put some language in there regarding to farms for the future to allow
Yeah,
waivers depending on experience and those types of things. So we ought to at least be consistent.
okay.
I would also add DIF to this recommendation. DIF is really
Yep.
kind of complicated to get into if you are still in the process of setting things up.
Okay, so that was language in number.
Four?
Yeah, so be consistent with 4. So Miriam, I'm gonna be looking to you to sort of tweak that one as well, and I'll take a look at that.
Question, Jody, this
Yeah.
specifically says farm transfer. But there are some farmers that are coming into the state that are not doing a transfer of a farm, they're starting a farm from scratch. And if this language were used, they would be excluded.
So was that the group's intention? I mean, I know you have, Bill, raised this point about Maine being an attractive location for new farm development. And I'm not arguing the point at all, but my recollection is that the majority of conversation about the purpose behind this particular recommendation had more to do with succession planning, and so I don't know. It's just a question of whether you all would like this expanded to capture Bill's point, or whether that dilutes your objective or not.
The conversation that took place before you got here involved, again, what I was just talking about, giving discretion built into the programs to determine new farmers. So in other words, if somebody is coming and has 0 dairy experience ever and is looking to start up, definitely in the new category. Somebody's coming who's run a farm else in another state and they're looking to set up a new farm here, they would get some kind of acknowledgement of their experience in the industry. So that would take them out of the classic new category
Okay,
with that
Yeah.
flexibility language.
I'm happy with that.
Do you feel like you have the direction that you need to create some edits to this one consistent with, or do you need further clarification?
I think that's clear. I think any way to word it will be my next challenge.
Okay. All right, then anything else on that before we move on to 12? So on 12, you know, based on Jenny's point in particular, there was a little bit of conversation about, do we want to change this recommendation to get more at a number of different infrastructure challenges, dairy feed availability, cost-effective dairy feed availability is one of them, but you know, the lack of veterinarians, the challenge of transportation. I think what I was hearing you say is that you'd rather address that in reference under the bullets of 3/14 and a little bit of reference in the introductory narrative, and not to take the focus off of dairy feed in this, but I might have read that wrong. Yeah, Ethan.
I was gonna say that the two biggest costs for almost all dairy farms is labor and feed. So I think feed deserves its own bullet.
I think it's critical, not necessarily critical.
I think grain is what I mean, but you know, cross kind of come into feed.
This could be something that we use to guide the legislature on different other bills too, whether healthy soils or.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna put a pin in the labor issue because that's a massive gap from, you know, this conversation. So we'll come back to that briefly toward the end, but go ahead, Steve.
To piggyback on that, thinking about policies on immigration and as far as guest workers and is all of that federal or is some of it state as well?
Federal.
Because I mean, not only dairy, but all of agriculture and including two large processors and they rely heavily on workforce there as well.
All right, well, we will come back to, go ahead, Ethan.
On that same note, though, I think it plays into exactly the same thing as crossing state lines with product. I think we could say that it's a concern, and if there was somebody in the state that can help us navigate the regulations as they are or as they change, I think that would be reasonable. Whether that's learning how to use H2A workers in dairy, which has always been said can't be done kind of thing, but can, and that relates definitely to orchards and potato farms and processors, I mean, across the board. If there was somebody that you could call and be like, how do I make this work? I can't get the paperwork done.
Yeah, that's a 14.
Well,
Add that as a
it's not something that May can fix, but they can help us understand.
Right.
Maybe.
Ariel?
I think even for things that are federal, it's valuable for us to potentially say, support advocacy efforts that would protect X.
And my recollection is the Dairy Farmers of America write-up that they submitted focused on this, had a bullet on this point as
Exactly.
well. Give me 1 second.
Now, I mean, I'm gonna say something really strange. We're never gonna change the national immigration requirements. That's gonna happen outside our wheelhouse. But if we can think of workarounds, and one of the things that I thought about is that if it were possible for a dairy farm to provide food, shelter for immigrants in exchange for their labor, that's not like they're being hired. Maybe we could actually develop a program in the state, to get around the federal regulation.
Well, I'm gonna, let's continue on with the rest of these recommendations. We'll circle back to the labor point and decide whether you want a recommendation added in that is explicitly about labor. With number 12, with number 12, it's entirely new. I'm sorry, number 13 is entirely new. And this was a result of the subgroup that met last week to talk about funding. And these two programs in particular were called out because of their successful implementation work. And they seem to merit enough, legitimacy to include them. But you all have not had a conversation about these, so I want to make sure that you're comfortable with the idea of this being included.
We're doing a seminar on the investment tax credit that exists in Maine now it's called Dirigo. I just said it. Maybe we should reference it by name. The old Maine investment tax credit is going away or has gone away, and the new one is Dirigo Business Incentives. It's part of the Dirigo Business Incentives, so you might want to just reference that if they're like, oh yeah, I had part in that.
And is it sufficiently different than, would it replace?
I think you could just replace the name.
Sorry,
You could just replace the name in that paragraph. The rest of it is, it's enough similar that it would be fine. Your description's broad enough.
oh, interesting, but reduce reference, eliminate the reference in the last sentence to New York.
No, New York will be fine. That investment tax credit, the ITC. The new program that's starting in Maine is called the Dirigo Business Incentives, and it gives you a 10% refundable credit of your investment, of your capital investment.
Understood, but in the last sentence in that, under that bullet, I referenced the fact that it happened that during one recent state budget, the legislature converted the ITC to a fully refundable tax credit for eligible farmers. Do you have any idea whether that is contemplated, baked into, referenced in any way in the Dirigo program?
It is part of the Dirigo. The only real difference between the Dirigo and the Maine one, the New York one that we talk about is New York's is 20%. And Maine's is gonna be 10% for all counties except Cumberland, Saginaw, and there's 3 counties that are more urban that it doesn't count. They get 5% back. The rest of Maine gets 10% back.
Got it.
Anything over like $50,000. So for example, if there was a farm in this room that was thinking about building a barn, they could get 10% of the value of that investment refunded in their next income tax.
But we are talking about the first bullet, not the second one about buildings.
Right, correct.
Okay, all right. Other thoughts about this particular one, Bill?
My only concern is farmers are sometimes defined as a separate class than business.
It specifically says agriculture, forestry, manufacturing. There's a few things that are ineligible, but agriculture, specifically dairy, is absolutely covered. If you were greenhouse, like sometimes the greenhouse guys are like, do we count as ag, but dairy certainly is included.
Any other concerns about this being in here, tweaks? No. All right, so on 14, just the changes that I made since the last time was that I eliminated any reference to a particular size bond. So I just made it more generic. And then rather than just kind of listing narratively some of the possible sources, I made it more explicit in bullet form, so it was clear to see the range of issues that you were hoping to address. And then I've made notes about the couple of items that would now be added to this list as a result of today's meeting. Any other points about that one? And bond would be listed first. I'm sorry, yeah. When these two things are combined, bond will be first and the other funding sources will follow it.
I have a question, I don't know if it's for Miriam or Craig. So the Dairy Improvement Fund right now has 2 phases. There's the ACF phase where the project gets reviewed for whether it hits right eligibility, but then there's the FAME piece. and that's the piece that drives everybody nuts. Is there any capacity or interest in recommending that come more entirely in-house? Which would require a statute change, but it would definitely smooth the process. It's a big lift, I get it.
Yeah, it's the staffing, but it's that, and it's also FAME is reviewing those documents to make a loan assessment. They are,
Right.
like, we are not a bank.
So they would still need to do, because they have the guarantee behind it.
The only thing that
Okay, got it.
could be improved, I think, if there was staffing for it, is I think if I had capacity, I would be supporting people as they go through the process of applying with FAME. There's stuff that comes up halfway through the process. Farmers find out that they need a lawyer to close, like all of these little silly things that come up. I think if I had capacity, those are things that I would help farmers get their package together much earlier in that process. So when they get to the part of interacting with FAME, it's gonna have issues, but you're gonna lower the number of things that you're gonna have to go back and fix with your paperwork. That's what I would love. I can't do it.
Okay, and I'm not seeing further changes to this one beyond what we've already talked about. Let's go back to the labor issue. One could argue it's a big missing piece here. The other argument is that these are issues in part outside of our control. Another perspective is that there are specific examples of training programs that are underway, whether it be through the Northeast Area Business Innovation Center or what's the Northern Maine?
Eastern Maine Development.
Eastern Maine Development. We could make reference to those. That might feel insufficient. You could be recommending that somehow these programs be replicated. I didn't want to just go without at least raising the issue and seeing whether you want something in here, Miriam.
Question, I've heard some feedback from some farmers, but I think never a dairy farmer. That one struggle with labor is housing. So if we were to talk about rural infrastructure investment, is dense, low-income housing something that we would want to potentially raise the idea of?
Yeah, well, I agree that the housing is a problem inherently.
I think New York has a program like that.
That's what I'm saying.
We're trying to hire somebody right now, and that's the hang up on getting her here from Vermont.
Yep.
Or, yeah.
That's the problem, but it's like one guy, he's trying to leave. Like 2 or 3 different times, and they don't have housing out there either, so.
Yeah.
There is some model, I think, and I don't understand the full cooperation. I haven't worked with a farm in New York to do it, but they do something through farm credit, the way it's done,
Yeah,
part of it. But
there are definitely some real issues with that program, but I think mentioning something that Bard could.
And what about mechanization as part of that picture? Is there opportunity there?
You're specifically robots or automatic feeders or things like that. It might depend on how extensive the grant parameters are. We're already talking about raising caps in there, and that will better reflect what the cost is to put in that kind of equipment.
So, Annie,
Also, in order to put in any kind of equipment like that, you basically need to completely build a brand new barn. Cause all these old barns they're not suited for any sort of robotics.
Andy, that.
Yeah, I mean, back to housing, I mean, it's, basically it's knowing someone in your community that has something for rent, which is next to impossible, or you do, like, we have 2 employees who are living on our farm, like, when it's just like. Yeah, so some sort of grant program or loan program or something that would help us, afford to, even if it's just buying a trailer and putting it on the property,
Right.
just. We need to be able to offer housing because no one can afford Yeah, I mean, it's renting a house right now is in Monmouth, it's $2,500 a month, is what I just saw one go up last week, you know.
So one concern that I have, given that it's December 12th, is that if we create an entirely new recommendation, I would really want you to all to vet that. And there is, at this point in the process, we don't have the luxury of doing that. Another more generic option is to add a bullet to 3/14 to talk about the need for housing,
And labor.
to support
Yeah.
the labor constraints for dairy farms. And the another option would be, I think over here that related to a different recommendation, and now I'm not remembering which it was, but anyway, that's my more kind of soft touch reference to labor.
Yeah, I think that's a good, I mean, just so we just put a line or two in one of these already existing things so that we can refer back to it when we're talking to the legislature.
Yes, not that you necessarily want to use my language, but when I said before, like indirect things and direct things, the labor issue would be the most direct of the indirect. Does that make, I mean,
Yeah.
but, and it ties in, we are hearing a ton of stuff about housing in Maine. And it probably is a good idea to put something about how dairy farmers are struggling with housing for labor and labor, right? I mean, that makes sense and connects it to other initiatives. Potentially.
All right, Mary.
Is a,
Oh, it's just said we have to have housing and we absolutely need it.
Miriam.
so is a bullet under that 3/14, that's just listing other indirect costs. We talked about railroads, we talked about road quality, housing, broadband.
What's one, yeah.
Are there other things that are really not particularly agricultural, but would be good infrastructure to be improved?
Suppose in the past, we would have always listed healthcare there and some of that's a tiny bit better, but it's still a concern.
Can someone help me understand the somebody give me a one line on the railroad piece?
It was exactly what somebody was talking about, was it, it's Jenny. So for example, my wife used to work for the grain company and they had at the mill to unload those into the mill, and that was broken. The rail company couldn't get the stuff there, so they brought all the grain to Waterville and they had to truck all the grain from Waterville to Augusta before it could be milled into the type of dairy grain. And so it took 3 extra drivers all day, 3 days a week. It's probably still happening. And some of it,
Just unloading everything. Next.
So
Aging infrastructure.
aging railway infrastructure.
like
Okay.
railway is the gold standard for getting grain to where it needs to go in large quantities, and we're bringing it within 20 miles and still trucking it.
Okay, who are we missing online? Rebecca, go right ahead.
I think we need to add a bullet and maybe infrastructure, I'm gonna use this loosely, on demand generation. And, there are states that have dairy promotion boards, such as New York or California. I know those are large population states, but if we aren't trying to get dairy out in front of the public, we're gonna continue to lose consumers. So, I mean, and I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier in the process, but if there's a way to add a bullet around, maybe we lean on MilkPEP or an organization to help drum up demand. Just because, I mean, we can't ignore that Class 1 just continues to decline.
Yeah.
So what about,
We have one.
Currently, we
Dairy
have a
promotion?
dairy promotion board.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but it boils down to funding again.
Right, but we can lean on MilkPEP or some other organizations to help. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I think it needs to be a bullet point somewhere, and if we're talking infrastructure in a large scope.
Just quickly, one of the things that I've understood better being on this and talking with Julie Maria a bunch is how the pool payments come back to the dairy farmers. So the biggest mover to get more money back to our dairy farmers would be to sell more fluid milk in Maine.
okay, gotcha. Thank you. All right. Are we at the end of this process? Is there some burning?
We might need to start.
Oh, no, they
You wanna go on vacation?
Weeks.
Better start talking.
I think we have what we need. Go ahead, Steve.
Just a couple little points, this is from what. Some comments that the person at DFA had sent, but it's applicable. As to what we're talking about. Thinking about ag exemptions to allow efficient movement of farm goods. And increase the truck gross weights for shipment of ag products. You think about whether it's rail, I don't know what. Whether it's rail or truck. Anything that can be done to eliminate costs for them. Will
So-
benefit all ag.
So again, whatever you want collectively, we'll get in this report. What I'm gonna flag is, you know, I think there can be this temptation at the 11th hour to like make this the laundry list and throw a whole pile of stuff in there that is not as fleshed out as the rest of the work that you've done thus far. And so, you know, I'm happy to add something in about support for demand generation of fluid milk. On the other hand, I'm also hearing that what we learned from Sarah Littlefield is that the trend is squarely in the direction of high consumption of dairy, but not necessarily in fluid form. And so is that, and again, I'm happy to do it, but I don't want to do it in a manner that's not thoughtful. So on that example, I want to make sure you're all in agreement with that idea. And similarly, any of the other ideas that DFA came forward with, I can throw in there too, but just make sure we're thinking.
At yesterday's Dairy Promotion Board meeting, we heard that fluid milk is no longer like this, it's more a gradual, you know, showing potential. And I think,
There's
and I hope
1%.
somebody will tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Maine has demonstrated a little bit stronger support in that, so it's not, it wouldn't be a lost measure to just remind Mainers and add some strength behind that, because there's already a tendency to support fluid milk, and we have that direct back that we have a lot of our milk going into that, well, almost all of it going into that market.
Sure. Happy to do it. And I think 3/14 is the place to do that. And again, didn't mean to squash any of DFA's ideas, but
I do think it is a good idea to direct what we want to have seen and thought about and not muddy the water too much. So I agree with eliminating a few of the recommendations that we have and putting a few things together and not bundling too many things up.
That might be able to be worked in the somewhat indirect too, because it could apply to guys who are transporting potatoes or something like that. If that's an agricultural product and they're allowed to take a little heavier load, it's more efficient for them too. So maybe it fits into
It may
one of
fit
those,
somewhere, yeah.
just agricultural exemptions for transportation items and things like that.
Benefit
This
all.
This is also an initiative that's being brought up on the Hill too, with IDFA and the weight restrictions on agricultural products in trucks. So like it's a duplicative effort. Like there are other, national initiatives going on in this space as well.
Well, and we've seen it in Maine besides. I mean, Susan Collins did that a few years ago about getting stuff to the county, right? You could go a heavier load on the highway where you didn't used to be able to. They went from 80 to 100,000 or whatever, and they made a big deal.
State listed, they're all 100,000.
They're all at least
Problem is when you
100,000
get to the
right?
state border.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's, I mean,
You can hit all of New England.
That's problem too with not like having this well baked enough, is that
Yes.
there are already
Right.
exemptions that exist. And so if we're gonna open up a can of worms without having a real understanding of what currently exists, how valuable is it? So, yeah.
Okay, then I think what I'm hearing is, yes, make reference to support for expanded demand generation on the fluid milk side. No reference to weight limitations issue. And I have my margin. So what's gonna happen now is redrafting reflective of the conversation today. Miriam and I are gonna work together on a couple of these. I will be sending a draft not only of the revised recommendations, but the full report to the commissioner by the end of Monday, and we're just gonna be going back and forth and editing until the end of the week. And as I mentioned earlier, the rest of the report is simply, what did you do for the last 6 months? You know, what happened at, what was the topic at each meeting, and what kind of public comments did we receive? Yeah, so there will be no surprises. And a portion of this introductory language that are in the recommendations currently will kind of become the introduction to the full report instead. So things will be moved around, but what you see is what you'll see in there.
I just have one comment, which I've made before. This is a selling document. And I would like it to be structured so that each thing that we feel is important gets equal weight. I mean, right now, if you took at the words, number of words that are put in a tier program versus everything else, tier program has almost as many words as everybody else. And so if somebody's reading a document and after they've slugged through the tier thing, they start to run out of energy. So placement and a selling document.
So I have not heard any feedback to the contrary, other than moving 3 to combine it with 14 and eliminating a couple of recommendations that you want this reordered in any way, or that you want less emphasis on the tier program than you currently have.
I didn't say less, I just said build up some of the other stuff. I mean, 14 has a number of very important things, very in it as a bullet point. So something that actually builds an understanding to the legislature that these aren't just knockoffs, that there is importance to it, and that there has to be some background information that's provided. And it may be that, I don't know, I mean, there's been talk of a feasibility study, so who knows where we're going to end up with, but there's got to be some action item to make things happen within the legislature that they can understand. From Julie Marie's comments of long-term dealing with the legislature, it's easy to get confused at that level.
I don't think it's abnormal though that the tier program have a more robust descriptors in it because it's a unique program that doesn't exist anywhere else. So I don't feel that I don't feel like the other recommendations are given any less weight. They're not as weight.
The only other point of clarification I'll make, and I can modify this if desired, is that the reason what looks like 14 now on its own, forget about the 3 coming into it, the reason 14 has just one line of text for each bullet is that it is it's the one-line summary of a previous recommendation that gives the full context. And I understand now we're going to be adding some things that don't have a bullet, that don't have a recommendation, but I think that those will be supported by narrative that I'll be adding. So that was the logic anyway.
So I would say that, I mean, we did a lot of important work here, but if Jody wants to go on vacation by tomorrow morning. If we only had one, if we had to leave this room with only one recommendation, I would think it would be the tier, and I think a lot of us would agree on, so. Not the one.
I think to Bill's point, this is a long report. There is some concern about exhaustion, but I think if we write an executive summary that the legislature can browse. They will know that there are other recommendations coming besides the tier program before they dig into the longer version of this. So they can investigate the ones that they're most curious about.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, and my hope, you know, when you put this into a broader report, the rest of the stuff in the report is not that long, so it's not going to make the full document a whole lot longer than what this is. So.
Just a quick bit of trivia on this issue. The very first task force that recommended creating the cheer program had it listed as number 16 of 17 recommendations.
So does that mean we need to have 17 and make the one? Magic number. It'd be like hotels, just have no 13.
Well, I want to just thank you all. This is a huge amount of work. Thanks, Tom, for dealing with our tech first.
And thank you for being our
Placing everything.
guide. Thank you.
Julie Marie for doing so much heavy lifting in the analysis with Bill's support also. Miriam, thank you so much. And everybody who participated really heavily in all of these subgroups, just a huge amount of work. So I think you landed in a good place. And hopefully the legislature will do everything that you say. Somebody online?
Rebecca or Libby?
Rebecca?
Oh, no, I was just clapping, saying thank you.
Oh, okay. And Libby? You're muted, Libby. Or is it? Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you and that I think that this has been a good working document that's put together and that the tier program is the best way to get money back to the farmers to help them with their bottom line. So hopefully that will help with the legislature.
Thank you.
And thanks to Lee online. who does-
And Lee,
yeah.
are you,
Oh,
you're muted.
muted.
Yeah, no, I just thank you for allowing me to be part of this group. I probably didn't contribute as much, but I definitely learned a lot. So thank you.
Participating. Yeah, and I just wanna emphasize what Craig and I just said. Thank you, Jody, so much for keeping us organized. Yeah.
We'll see. Hopefully you like the end product.
It's going rogue now.
Hey, Jody, you've done an excellent job of herding us to this end point.
Well, happy holidays. All of you. Yeah. Take food on your way out.
Happy